A key date on the NBA calendar, the buyout deadline, coming right up this week. Will the Pacers be involved or should they? Plus, Pacers-Mavs tonight, first Pacers-Mavs game of the season. Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs will join us to talk Pacers-Mavs and team building. We'll get to it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, game day, after 2 days off for the Pacers-Mavs. We'll talk Mavs in the second two segments with Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs, but first, let's talk about the buyout market, one of the big final transactional periods of the NBA season, because March 1st is the deadline for it, with a little over a month to go of the season. And that includes March 1st itself. So by Wednesday, including Wednesday, if a player is waived by the team they are currently on, they would still be playoff eligible for any new team they sign with. If that player is waived on March 2nd or later, they are not playoff eligible for any new team. So that's why that is officially considered the end of NBA buyout season. If you don't know what an NBA buyout is, effectively a contract is kind of restructured to be less, and then a player's waived, and then they sign with a different team usually to make up that money that their restructured contract was. Essentially, it's a way for a team to save a little bit of money and trade a player for some cash savings after the trade deadline. That's not a great way of actually describing what it is, but effectively a player gets paid less by their current team. They make up that money from a different team. So the old team gets the advantage of saving money and having a roster spot. The new team gets a good player. And so everybody kind of wins. And that's why with these lower value vets who are still good, they change teams after the trade deadline quite often. For example, Pacers play the Mavs tonight. Justin Holiday, who was traded technically to the Rockets at the trade deadline. The Rockets bought him out. He signed with the Mavericks, right? So he's making more money or the same amount of money this season, but he's now on a team that makes more sense for him to be on. And the Pacers have been involved in this somewhat often in the Kevin Pritchard era. They did, well, not somewhat often, I guess. They did a buyout with Tristan Thompson last season. That roster spot ended up becoming Terry Taylor, so that worked out for them just fine. But that's sort of the pro of this, right? They opened up center minutes for Jalen Smith and Goga Bitadze down the stretch. They freed up a roster spot, which is, of course, valuable. Justin Anderson took it for a little bit of time as well. The Pacers got money savings and valuable young player experience, right? That was big for them. And they ended up getting a player who was on their team the following season with the roster spot down the stretch, right? That's the advantage of a buyout. You save money and you get a roster spot. And so teams try to, when they can, get involved because money savings and the best use of roster spots are good. But the flip side of it is you can sometimes acquire a player who was bought out. And that's usually reserved for better teams, right? The last time the Pacers scooped a buyout player up was Trevor Booker in the 2017-18 season. He ended up being their backup power forward for the postseason that year. He was just fine, a veteran buyout from the Sixers that year. Pacers needed him. He was just good. He was a Locked On Pacers guest that following summer. But that is the last time they significantly added a buyout player mid-season. But they have done both sides of the coin in terms of getting rid of Tristan Thompson last year and getting Booker a few years ago. And so that is usually how a buyout works and why the timing is what it is. And so the Pacers have a full roster right now, which means they can't actually sign any players without waiving someone. So their involvement in the buyout market would require them to buy someone out themselves or just cut someone. And that's where the discussion here gets a little tricky, because it's hard for me to imagine a player becoming available that the Pacers would be rushing to trip all over and grab, especially because playoff eligibility might not matter to them that much. Like RJ Hampton was one that I thought made sense. If you recall, I did a show last week or the week before, I can't remember now, about moves the Pacers can still make this season. And when talking about the buyout market, RJ Hampton was the first guy I said. He was a first-round pick a few years ago. He went to the Magic. The Magic had just no role for him. It wasn't working out. And granted, he might just not be any good. But if you get a young player on a flyer like that, that's something that teams lower in the standings could do. That kind of made sense for the Pacers to me. He has since sided with the Pistons. But that kind of thing can happen at this market time if there's just a bad fit. And I'll talk about one player that I think makes, I guess, some sense for a buyout, although I don't know. We'll get to that as time progresses. But so for the Pacers, they don't need vets, right? Like a lot of the buyouts that have already happened. I already talked about Justin Holiday, but like Danny Green, Terrence Ross, John Wall, Russell Westbrook, like obviously these big name guys, Pacers don't need them or want them, right? They have no reason to get involved in a buyout in that sort of way. Even Ibaka, who they cut themselves, right? Like that doesn't make sense for the Pacers to get involved in, but it's not like impossible that a young player or something that makes sense for the Pacers could be out there. The name that I would consider, I guess the only one I thought of when I was scanning a lot of the league was Kevin Knox, right? Maybe the Portland Trailblazers do not have use for him or want him. They are also flirting with expensive tax stuff this season, right? If they say, we can save a little money and you can get another spot, I guess if you're the Pacers and this 23-year-old forward becomes available, you'd sniff it and consider it, even though his career has not panned out the way he had hoped since being drafted in the top 10. But that's kind of the only one to me. And it's not even a buyout, air quotes on that, because he doesn't make anything. But that's the gist of what it would be, is like a young player on like a team that is running up against the tax or something and needs the savings for something down the season. That's like the only one that makes any sense to me. The NBA's own site put up a list of 15 potential buyout candidates, and in their other candidate section, Kevin Knox was listed. Like, I don't feel that crazy for including him, even though I highly doubt he's a buyout guy. But that is what the Pacers would look at, because all the other guys who have been bought out are candidates, don't make any sense for the Pacers, whether that's like Dario Saric or Derrick Rose could be one for the Knicks, or DeAndre Jordan. No, that's not a buyout. That'd be more of a waiver. You could go on and on with the names that are still potentially out there. Corey Joseph, Nerlens Noel with Detroit. Both of those seem like maybes as this season keeps going. So it seems like if the Pacers get involved in the buyout market and they actually acquire a player, it would be someone like that on a tax-concerned team or a financially concerned team that wants to make a little savings or open a roster spot, and a young player gets moved, because I don't think the Pacers would scoop up a veteran. Now, again, the Pacers would have to clear a roster spot themselves. They don't necessarily have any buyout candidates, right? On the NBA's article that I'm going through, where they list 15 buyout candidates, one of them is Serge Ibaka, and it lists Indiana as his team, which is funny. He's already been waived. That's not even technically a buyout. Doesn't matter. You get the gist. He was waived before March 1st. So if he signs with another team, he can play in the playoffs for that team. George Hill is also listed in the piece, although the NBA site does note that it doesn't look like, it says, quote, it doesn't look like as if Hill will be cut loose by the Pacers. And remember, the Pacers and Hill had that discussion at the trade. Do you want to stay here, or we'll cut you if you want to go to another team? And Hill opted to stay with the Pacers. I really don't see him changing his mind on that front. It doesn't seem like anything's happened in these couple weeks that would be surprising to him about the team environment or the role he has or anything like that, especially since he's noted that he would like to retire with this franchise someday. So he seems like the only one that makes any sense to me, quite frankly, as a buyout candidate, because typically a guy you'd buy out is someone who has more value to another team or is blocking young players or something like that, and is on an expiring deal. So is it possible the Pacers get involved in the buyout market or just cut somebody? Yeah, it's possible, right? Any move is, in theory, possible. In fact, maybe not. Kevin Knox might be 2A eligible. I forget how that exactly works. But if someone who is 2A eligible gets cut or bought out before March 1st, maybe the Pacers could scoop them up a 2A guy if they cut one of Kendall Brown or Trevelyan Queen. This is all just speculative for me, but looking at the buyout market with 2 days to go, really 1 day by the time you're hearing this, 2 days for me talking, I would say it's very unlikely the Pacers get involved this year, because the guys that make sense for them to buy out seem like they want to stay, and because there's no one that would get bought out by another team that makes sense for the Pacers. But I think these are all facts you need to know as we head into these couple days, as the last kind of key transactional waiver period of significant NBA players comes for the season. But we'll see what the Pacers ultimately do, right? I didn't think the Tristan Thompson buyout would happen when it did, after he'd already played in 4 games for the Pacers, but it did happen then, and that's just how this thing goes. Let's talk Pacers Mavs. The last time the Pacers played the Mavs was January of 2022. Sabonis started for the Pacers. Only one player who played for the Pacers in that game played in the Pacers game on Saturday against the Magic. How times have changed. Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs will join us to talk about the Kyrie Irving Mavs and team building. What did the Mavs do well that the Pacers can copy? Before he joins and we talk about that, though, let me talk to you guys about Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you've got to try a Built Bar. If you're trying to eat a little healthier this year, just eat healthier in general, then you've got to try Built Bar. You don't have to compromise taste like you do with other protein bars. They're healthy and actually tasty. They're so delicious, you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes them so good? They're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they have unbelievable flavors like coconut almond, churro, and my favorite, the peanut butter brownie. I don't know how they do it, but they taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better, again, that healthy part of it. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. You can get them at built.com, but now you don't have to wait around for a box that you order. You can also get them at your local Walmart or at Sam's Club. Head to the nearest Walmart for you today. You can go to the pharmacy section and grab Built Bars in a 4-box, cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs. You can go to Sam's Club and grab a 13-bar box with their hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. Try Built Bar today. Thanks for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Locked On Bucks. They're on a roll. They've won like 14 games in a row, and an ownership change that has gone very under the media radar. Not that it hasn't been covered, it hasn't been discussed that much in Milwaukee. They'll break that all down over there. Now let's bring in Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs to talk Pacers Mavs. We are now joined by Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs and the channel coordinator at kind of my boss. I don't really know what the best way to describe this is. But Nick is here covering the Mavs, Pacers Mavs tonight. Unbelievable amount of time since the last Pacers Mavs game where Karis LeVert, Domantas Sabonis started for the Pacers the last time these two teams face off. And Rick Carlisle returns to Dallas. Obviously, he's not the coach anymore, but Nick, do the Mavs still have a bell in their practice facility that the Pacers do now? Is that still a thing?
The bell was Daryl Armstrong's whole thing, and Daryl Armstrong is still, so the bell I think is still in the practice facility, and they still do like a shooting competition where whoever hits more threes or something at the end of their shooting competition, Daryl Armstrong walks over and he rings the bell and he goes, "Hear ye, hear ye," and then he yells whoever wins and all that. I don't think I'm your boss, but I do think I'm the only person that is paid to listen to Locked On Pacers.
We
can put it that way. We can put it that way.
I don't know what to describe it as. We don't have to get into that here. Yeah, the bell, for those who don't know, Carlisle installed it for their shooting drills. If you hit 20 out of 25 and around the world, you get to ring the bell. Although it became such a thing that they would ring it really hard, and they've broken like 3 or 4 bells this year. At one point, it was like a soundbite that wasn't the bell. So it's a good way to do shooting drills and make them competitive, but it also is a way to break bells. So that's a fun thing. Pacers Mavs, though, looking forward to this game, seeing Justin Holiday for like the 5th time this season for the Pacers because they played the Hawks 4 times already. But from a serious perspective, the Mavs are a much different team. They also have an MVP candidate, Kyrie Irving, in the mix now. They did really well at first, but Luka wasn't playing, and now Luka's back, and it's kind of rocky. How have the new look Mavs looked since this big trade?
They've been very different. There's one side, there's this kind of push and pull. There's two different styles that they want to play with. Kyrie Irving, he brought a level of ball handling, a level of ball movement, of tempo, of pushing the pace that Luka Doncic does not want to run, that Jalen Brunson did not want to run, that Spencer Dinwiddie was reluctant to run, but I think could have, but decided not to, basically. And the Mavericks were last in the NBA in pace. And Kyrie Irving joins, and like 4 games later, they're second to last in the NBA in pace. And so like they just risen up just a little bit. And he's trying to bring that kind of ball movement style to the offense. Luka Doncic wants to slow it down. They're trying to meld that together. You saw it in the first couple of games they've played that it came down to the couple, like a clutch possession. And there was the possession where Luka took a contested shot that he shouldn't have taken. It should have passed to Kyrie. There was another game where they were passing back and forth and they didn't get a shot up because they were like, your turn, going back and forth, trying to be try to give the other guy the ball. And so they're still trying to meld those two styles. And that's how they're going to work on offense. They've still been incredible, like 133 points per 100 possessions on offense when those two guys are on the court. Like just insanely good when both of those guys play. And then when one of them is off, to have somebody else, to have Kyrie or to have Luka on the court when the other is off has been amazing. However, losing Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber being out, their defense has been awful, just absolutely awful. They get destroyed in the middle. They tried to bring in JaVale McGee over the offseason. That didn't work. It hasn't really worked for them. They've tried the Christian Wood experiment, and that hasn't necessarily worked for them. Definitely hasn't helped their defense. And so now it's like Dwight Powell again. It's Rick Carlisle's favorite guy, Dwight Powell. It's still just the starting center. There's a meme I saw on Mavs Reddit the other day that was a guy coming down from like a time machine spaceship, and he's like, "Hey, what year is it?" And they're like, "Who's the center for the Mavericks?" They're like, "Dwight Powell," and he goes, "Damn it, it could be any year. It could be any year."
Yeah, look, that was something that I thought would be the most interesting part of the Mavs, right? Like I think you've been tracking this in a thread. Like they very well could have the best offense in the league.
Yeah.
Close to maybe the best offense like ever for a season by the end of the season, but you got to stop people. And it sounds like Mark Stein said Kleba could be back for this game, although you never know in the first game what you're going to get from that guy. But he'll be helpful on D. But that's the hard part, right? When you have two great scoring guards, you can score like crazy, but you got to stop people. I don't think Kyrie and Luka are really known for that part of their game for a reason. So if the Pacers are going to have a chance, I think that is the thing. Has it been more that those two can't keep people in front? Like, could this be a big Halliburton game? Is it pick and roll stuff? Could this be a big Turner game? Turner's been on fire. He's averaging over 30 points per game since the break. Where do you feel like they've struggled, and do the Pacers have anyone who could tear that up?
Yeah, Sean Sweeney is the Mavs lead assistant, and he's the guy that created their defense basically, and was part of that with the Lakers with Frank Vogel, and Jason Kidd was there, and like they've taken this defense across. They used it the first year with the Bucks and kind of changed it when that Bucks defense was really good. And the second year they were really awful. Like they've tried this, and it's all predicated on all five guys being in communication, all five guys knowing exactly where to be in their rotations. And if one guy is like a loose end, all the other guys have to do so much else to cover, because they're switching all the time, they're rotating all the time, they're making sure that somebody's over to help. If they come over to double like they did the other night, they were trying to double Anthony Davis, and then when they don't do it like effectively enough or efficiently enough or hit their marks right away, all of a sudden Jared Vanderbilt's open on a cut, or he's getting an offensive rebound because somebody else is helping over here. And so when Luka is not like paying attention to offensive rebounds or to rebounds in general, or to a guy that's cutting behind him, or if Reggie Bullock gets blown by for like the fifth time, or if Kyrie Irving is just too small to guard somebody, it just all breaks down. Like it really takes one guy, Dwight Powell, too small under the basket. Anthony Davis just like body checks him, and he's out of the picture. So if one guy is out of position, then your defense kind of breaks down, and so that makes it really hard. It makes it really, and it's all predicated on effort, I think. And so it comes down to when you play in the playoffs. Last year, they were able to just everybody's all locked in, right? Everybody's putting in 100% effort. Everybody's locked in and wanting to do the right thing. They knew each other by then, and you can play a really good defense, and you can play defense well enough to hold your opponents, and then you hope Luka can create enough offense on the other end to win games. And that's how they won in the playoffs last year. This year, if the regular season is another thing. Like there's not enough intentionality. There's not enough paying attention on defense to be a good enough defense, so that the offense, which has been great since bringing in Kyrie, is good enough for them to win these games.
Sounds like a defense that a very smart Tyrese Halliburton could cut right up. Can't fall asleep, or he will find it that. I mean, he just in Orlando on Saturday, he had maybe the best passing game I've seen from him his entire career. Like jumping up and throwing him behind his back and through his legs. And Miles Turner had like 1,000 wide open dunks. He had 14 assists and barely cracked 30 minutes. He was ridiculous in that game. So I feel like, can punish that. The rest of the Pacers, they don't call it random action like on purpose, but like it's sort of random throughout the game. They try to run in transition, and to run in transition, you have to get stops. And I think that is where this game, I think, will be hard for the Pacers, is even if the Mavs defense isn't dialed in, they'll be playing a lot of half court because the Mavs can score so much. And that's why I think the Mavs would be the favorites in this game. But I do think stylistically there are ways the Pacers can get involved and exploit things. And do you feel like, it's like a schematic thing causing the Mavs issues right now? Or is it like a honeymoon period with the new player? There's a lot of discussion about that. Like, what's the last team that made this huge in-season trade and was really good? And I get where that discussion comes from, but at the same time, Mavs were in the conference finals last year. It's not like their base is as low as some of the other teams that discussion usually tends to talk about. So I'm curious where they are on that totem pole right now.
The last player I think was Pau Gasol, was like the last one that went to the team traded him in season. The Lakers with Kobe, they traded him in season and brought him in, and then they went to the finals. I think that's the last one that's succeeded, if you want to count that. They didn't even win that first finals, but yeah, there's so many ways. Like you just look at that Lakers game from the other day, right? From Sunday. There's enough blame to go around, right? But also, like, there's so many ways they lost, right? They're small on the inside. They can't rebound. Rebounding's always been a problem for them. They can't defend the rim with Dwight Powell or Christian Wood, or Maxi's been fine, but he's out. And so maybe when he comes back on Tuesday, hopefully that helps the Mavericks there, just with his switching and his ability to space the floor still. And JaVale McGee can't play. And they tried Markieff Morris. So we'll see what happens with that. But they tried him at 5 for a couple minutes here and there. He got 3 fouls in like 2 minutes. And so they just can't cover that area of the court. Then they have issues where if they can hit their wide open threes, they're a dominant team. First half, they hit like 11 of their 22 wide open threes. Second half, it was like 7 of 20 wide open threes, and they lost. It's just, that's what it is. But if Luka and Kyrie can be good enough, they can cover a lot of those weaknesses. Kyrie missed a bunch of open threes. He admitted after the game, he said, hey, yeah, I got to make those shots. He was 2 of 10 from 3. He missed 8 threes. Most of them are pretty much wide open, like nobody around him. And he just missed those shots that he normally makes. He makes a couple of those shots. It's a completely different game. That's been this Mavericks thing, is that if they can hit enough threes, if their stars now can be good enough, they can win games. But they have to both be good enough, or else they're just going to get beat in so many other areas of the game. Points in the paint, rebounding, so many other areas that they're just going to lose. And so when you look at a team like that, their stars have to be good enough to cover the holes.
Last one, the quickie, and I talked about buyouts in the opening segment. Justin Holiday is a Mav. Only 2 games so far, but most of his career, the majority of his career, which is weird to say because it's only 3 seasons, but he bounced around so much that I guess that's still the majority, was with the Pacers. How's he been helping out this Dallas team so far?
First game, came in 4 of 5 from 3. Love that left corner. He was just dominant. And after the game, he spoke to the media and was just like, I'm real happy to be here. He posted like 4, 5, 6 times, I think, to Instagram within the first 48 hours. He was like super happy to be in Dallas and have
the easiest shots ever on that team.
He's getting wide open shots. He went from out of the rotation for a Hawks team with all the turmoil and the coach firing that they had to now the Mavericks, and he's starting for the Mavericks. So starting for a better team with these wide open shots and all that, who I guess have their own turmoil, but at least it's not like a coach is getting fired or players want the coach out turmoil. That's a whole different thing. But yeah, he's been great. He went in his first game from coming off the bench, getting some minutes to starting in his second game, and then actually closing out the game because they like his spot up shooting.
If you're 6'8" and you can shoot and you can kind of defend, there's a role for you on good teams, and Justin Holiday can do exactly that. I want to talk about team building because the Pacers are better than everybody thought, but still kind of in year 1 of a rebuild, and the Mavs have certainly had a unique team building exercise in the last couple of years. Before we do that, though, got to talk to everybody about LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. You hop onto LinkedIn, you click a few buttons, bang, you can create your free job post. You add a purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, and you can spread the word that you're hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering high-quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Very easy second listen. How about Locked On Mavs to hear about Rick Carlisle's old team, emerging franchise with a new star in tow, trying to fight in this Western Conference is crazy. There's 2 losses that separate the 4th-seeded Suns and the 12th-seeded Blazers, 13th-seeded Blazers, whatever it is. It's insane. Mavs right in the thick of it. Nick and Isaac have everything for you over at Locked On Mavs. Nick, here's what I thought was going to be the case this year. The Pacers were going to go about 27 and 50-something, whatever math says that is, 55. And I have to talk about rebuilding a lot and how, what the key steps are along the way. And, this year for the Pacers has been talked about as a new era. Carlisle called it kind of like year 1, 1.5 of a rebuild. Yet here they sit looking like they're going to win closer to 35, 36 games. They're ahead of schedule. So talking about rebuilding for a long-term goal is not quite what needs to be said for this team, but I still like to figure out for every other team in the league what they did well or poorly in building their team so the Pacers can know what to emulate and what not to. And so from a Mavs perspective, they did build one team fantastically. They won a title not very recently, somewhat recently. They also have one of the best players in the league right now on their team. So in your eyes, even going to the Donnie Nelson era or just looking at Nico Harrison, whatever you want to do, what have the Mavs done well building their team historically and poorly? And are those things replicatable by other franchises.
I think what they've done well is they've taken some risks. Luka Doncic was kind of a risk. I was dead set on him being the number 1 pick in the draft. I think a lot of people were, and apparently the Suns weren't, apparently the Kings weren't, apparently the Hawks weren't. So the Mavs took that kind of risk and decided to, hey, it's worth it to go up and get this guy. And then halfway through his rookie year, they realized, all right, this guy, Rick Carlisle realized, all right, this is the guy. We got to put the ball in his hands. So they made a trade for Kristaps Porzingis, took that risk. And then the Kristaps Porzingis thing didn't work. Rick Carlisle leaves. Donnie Nelson is out, which is a risk for the Mavericks because Donnie Nelson had been the GM for like over 20 years. Rick Carlisle had been the coach for like 15 years or something, like 10 years, something like that. And so they take the risk and bring in Nico Harrison, who had not been a GM, had not been in an NBA front office before. They take that risk, and now they take a risk of trading away Kristaps Porzingis and kind of bailing on that experiment. And they bring in Spencer Dinwiddie and then they go to the conference finals. Then they take the risk of losing Jalen Brunson, and that was a bad risk. And then they replace that now with Kyrie Irving and taking the risk on him. So I think it's all about these little risks they've taken. Some of them have been great. Luka has been a great risk. I think Kyrie is probably a great risk. Well, I'll see if I eat those words in like 12 months or so, depending on if he does sign that contract or if he signs it and then something else happens. You never know with Kyrie what could happen or how he changes his mind. But they take those risks, and some of those have been good. The Porzingis trade, the second one where they sent him to Washington, I thought was a good trade for them. They needed to move on from that, and they needed to get another ball handler. They did that, and then boom, the Mavs made the conference finals. That was a good risk. The bad risks were not trusting Jalen Brunson and signing into the contract extension. So like bailing on that too early, or just getting a little too cute with it and trying to trade him and trying to send him out. That whole situation is muddy. You can even ask Rick Brunson, his dad. He's got his own opinions about it that he shared with ESPN and others about where it went bad and everything. But so that they took the risk of, all right, we're going to try to trade this guy instead of re-signing him and then do that and try and make that big move now. And that didn't work out. And so they can learn some lessons from the Mavericks by learning what type of risks are good enough. If you can lose somebody for nothing, probably not a good risk to take to try and like not sign him to that extension early, or even not give him the full max or a type of max in the offseason. I think Brunson would have left in the offseason no matter what money the Mavs were giving him. He was dead set on going to the Knicks at that point, but it was the extension before that. And that I think has been the biggest risk the Mavericks took that has not panned out yet, or that didn't pan out for them.
I think with risks, the timing of them is such a key part of assessing how risky something truly is. Like, yeah, I get what you're saying about Luka being potentially risky, especially because other teams passed on him. But at the same time, when you're in the tail end of Dirk's career, you could take a risk then, and if it fails, it's kind of like, meh, whatever. We're already kind of entering a new era anyway, right? We'll have like another good draft pick in a few years if this doesn't work out. That is a good time to take a risk. Early still in Luka's career to change your front office and coach, that's a good time. Blowing all your draft picks when Luka's a rookie on a guy who could be a fit with him, that less good timing there. You get what I'm saying. And
the Porzingis trade was a good risk, I think, the first time around.
I think it was too early. For me, I thought it was too early, but I get why he's good. If you get a
the
good
problem
player.
is that like with him and what we've learned from Luka is the thing that they should have learned from LeBron and maybe just him is that your team is too good. Those draft picks don't mean anything. Like they really only have one other draft pick. They had one top 10 pick that they sent in the Luka trade that was Cam Reddish, right? That the Hawks fans would kind of like dangle over the Mavs and be like, hey, look, we won this trade because we got this other guy with that other pick you sent us. And that we've seen how that panned out years later. So that would have been the only other top 10 pick they got. And so those picks that then eventually just become either the 25th, the 24th, and those don't really mean as much at that point. And so you try that. You risk a 25th pick on Christian Wood to see if that'll work out. But so sending two of those away. The other thing I think that they did with the Porzingis trade that didn't really work out for them is they tied their draft picks up for a long time because they pushed them back. They had already sent out the next pick for the Luka trade, that would be the 2019 draft. That was that one. So they had to push the picks out. They wanted to keep that 2020 pick where they picked Josh Green. So they pushed the picks out a little bit, and then now their draft picks are held up for years. Like years they couldn't trade a first round pick, and then this year they were finally able to trade one. They sent it for Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, that's a tricky part of it. And I think like another way to talk about the timing of a risk is these two trades have been kind of popular recently because one of the players just had an epic game on national TV. But the comparison was the Drew Holiday trade and the DeJounte Murray trade recently. And the Bucks were very well established, several good playoff runs. Giannis is obviously amazing. Like, that's a good time to trade lots of stuff for a good point guard. Whereas the Hawks, they had the one good playoffs, but I think everybody kind of knew they weren't that good. And then they had a bad playoffs last year, and they were kind of teetering on their new coach. And then they trade a bunch of stuff for a guy that doesn't fit so well with Trae Young, right? So, like, DeJounte is great. You get good players when you can, but the timing of risk certainly matters. And that paid off very well for the Bucks and less well. It's early, but less well for the Hawks. So if you're the Pacers and you are willing to take risks, right? Do you want to do it now when you have a ton of extra picks yourself and you have cap space coming this summer and Tyrese Halliburton's not expensive yet? Like, yeah, that seems like a safe time for a risk. But at the same time, once you do pay Halliburton, your team's kind of set if you spend now, right? So you have to really think about the timing of those things. And that's where I think risks can be tricky. And this front office has kind of only taken – Tyreek Evans was a risk they took on a shorter deal. Didn't work out. TJ Warren was a risk. That did work out, right? Although injuries kind of hurt him. So, the timing is in context is important. And I think for the Pacers, especially as they're so early in this process, figuring out when is the right time to do something like that will be the tricky part.
The risk the Pacers should take, is trading Miles Turner back to his hometown so that he can play for the Dallas Mavericks.
How should I have
that's
the
next
was coming? Is it even
how many times have I
how many more?
No,
the
probably.
Mavs have one pick to trade, and they won't trade Josh Green.
Well, this offseason they could trade two, so they could send. Two picks and Tim Hardaway.
The pick they would have in the draft is one of the picks, right? So,
yes, yeah. 2023. No, 2023. This year goes to the Knicks, so it'd be future picks. So we're talking like 2029.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I'm sure the Pacers will be ready for that. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen there, but it's his hometown. I'm sure he'll have fun and wear the cowboy hat entering the stadium.
Oh, yeah.
That picture
finally
comes
the
out
Mavs
every year, doesn't it?
Finally, the Mavs would have a center. And he works out. He already works out in the offseason in the Mavs facility. So,
have you read about his bee yoga that he does in Texas?
With bees? Like
one summer when he was really working on himself and in the mental part of the game, he did yoga with bees.
That's like goat yoga, but like the insect version.
Yeah, and like could be painful if you panic.
I would think for me, like if I'm doing a certain move and I'm like shaking, I don't know if you've ever done yoga before. You put yourself in a certain move and then all of a sudden your muscles like spaz because you can't hold yourself up. I feel like that would be a prime time for a bee to just kill me, I guess.
I'm not going to advocate or talk about trades on February 27th, but I will say,
after the trade deadline,
I will say Miles Turner would be a good fit with the Mavs, despite him also being a good fit with the Pacers.
My hottest take before the season was if the Mavs were able to turn Tim Hardaway and Christian Wood into Terry Rozier and Miles Turner, they'd win the title. Like before the Kyrie trade. If they could figure out a way to do that. They needed one more ball handler. They needed a real center. Those are the two things they needed. I guess they got Kyrie, but then they still only have two ball handlers.
Yeah, part of the reason the Pacers have been good is because Miles Turner's been amazing. So I don't think they're lining up for that.
No, they're not.
No. Nick, thank you very much for joining today. Where can people follow you and Locked On Mavs to get the latest on the Western Conference's 5th seed right now? 4th seed? I can't. The West is insane.
By the time you're listening to this, it'll be different.
Yeah, I'm tired of guessing what seeds they are.
Yeah, at Nick Van Exit on Twitter and Locked On Mavs, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.
Great Locked On Mavs today. Talking about Jason Kidd saying, you know what?
Can I get you? Can I?
I'm not playing. I'm watching, just like you guys.
Turns out, Jason Kidd, just like us. Just like us.
The Locked On Mavs has a soundboard. I'd say that's something I need to.
The soundboard is amazing. Also, we have an incredible number of drops that were said from Jason Kidd to me or Isaac. This one,
I'm not playing. I'm watching, just like you guys.
We got the classic.
Good morning, Isaac.
Which is just great. This one that'll never die.
Nick, that's a good question.
This one about Reggie Bullock last year.
I have to apologize that you felt that he should have played more.
That was to me.
Wow.
This one from Nico Harrison to Isaac.
Explain yourself. Sorry.
Which is just an incredible.
Wow. I'm lacking on the FX here at Locked On Pacers, but tomorrow we'll be talking Pacers Mavs, everything you need to know from Carlisle back in Dallas round 2, the Pacers performance and more. Thursday talking Spurs and tiebreakers. Pacers have some important ones to monitor down the stretch of this season with those teams near the back of the plan. So lots of fun stuff coming here on Locked On Pacers. Thank you guys so much for listening today. We will see you tomorrow.